Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about why Radiant Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel did not hit, in my humble opinion. All right, so I have Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel. I bought it a little later than I wanted to. I have it. I've read through it. There are problems here. All right, so let's get into this because this is complicated and this is a really important book, and I think we need to unpack why this thing didn't hit. All right. So first of all, you can't talk about Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel without talking about its main purpose. What may have been its main purpose. I think this is, in my humble opinion, this is the main purpose of Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons has a huge problem with cultural representation. It has had a crap ton of bog standard middle-aged white dudes with beards building this thing. It's like a huge percentage, right? And there are like historical facts about Dungeons and Dragons that are staggering and upsetting, right? Like one of the biggest ones is there has never been the design lead of Dungeons and Dragons has never changed in these parameters. It has always been male. It has always been middle aged. It has always been white. Period. There has never been a period that has allowed that to change by gender, by age, by race, and it's a problem. It's a problem, right? And in my humble opinion, I think Kate Welch was brought in specifically to break that, right? We had a problem in America. We had 42 white, presidents in a row, and then we had President Obama, right? And it changed history, right? And so Dungeons and Dragons has this historical problem with the race of the designers, right? And the gender and the age, right? Like it's a huge problem, okay? And so one of the reasons why I love Dungeons and Dragons, they don't just sit around and ignore their problems. They try to change them. Sometimes they fail, but they try to make progress. So one thing it is said, hey, we're going to build, Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel. It's going to be the first D&D canon hardback ever written with every author being a person of color. And they did it. That's done. That is accomplished, right? And it sets a bar that every other indie company needs to meet, okay? All right, now, that needed to happen from a cultural perspective. Also from a cultural perspective, right? We say diversity matters, and that if you hire in a diverse way, you're going to get a better product, right? And so Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel should have been this situation where everybody was like, oh my gosh, diversity does matter. This is so much better. And in my humble opinion, it's not, right? I think it was absolutely correct that Dungeons and Dragons do this. They needed to bring forward a book that was written all by people of color, because it had never been done, and it addressed many of the problems in their history, right? So I think the goal was noble, the goal was right, but there is a problem with Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel. I'm going to share my humble opinion, and then you let me know if I'm wrong on any of this. This is a sensitive subject, right? But the reality is, first of all, I'm saying Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel did not hit, right? And what I mean by that is it just didn't excite the D&D community, and it did not excite the D&D community, not by any stretch of the imagination, right? And you could just and what it means is engagement, right? So first of all, every Dungeons and Dragons, every D&D canon hardback gets a huge amount of attention the moment it drops, just because it's the new D&D canon hardback, right? That is not a small thing. It is a major thing, and every D&D canon hardback gets like bonkers coverage, right? And it's just how it rolls. It's just the reality of it, right? So, and Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel got that, right? But if 2 weeks after this thing was out, people forgot it existed. Why? All right. So whose fault is this, right? I'm going to give you my humble opinion. One, is it the D&D community saying, book of people of color, no, do not want? Or was there multiple fundamental flaws in this book? I think it's the second, right? So, no question, there are people who are very prejudiced and would have walked away from this book. I think there were people absolutely who walked away from this book based on the fact that it was written by people of color. I think that was a small amount. I think it was a significant amount of grognards, people who like older versions of Dungeons and Dragons, And frankly, as I grow older, I see this. There is a racism has an orbit, in my humble opinion, and the older you get, the more it sucks you in, right? I could be wrong about that. Tell me if you think I'm wrong about that. But I think the older you are, the more likely you are prejudiced, deeply prejudiced, right? And so we have to acknowledge that and fight it and say, I'm not going to allow myself to fall into prejudice as I age. I think it's an aspect of humanity, and we want to say, no, we're not going to accept this. I'm not going to just fall. I'm not just going to, orbit prejudice and allow myself to get drawn in further. We got to hit the booster rockets and make our way out, right? So without a doubt, one of the reasons why Radiant Citadel did not hit is I think a portion of the Dungeons & Dragons community walked away from it out of deep, deep prejudice because it was written by people of color, right? Now, I bought it. I didn't walk away with it. I fully read it and I engaged with it. But there are actual, real, genuine problems with this book. And I want to talk about it because I want this to get fixed. And I want us to have books that are written by all people of color that are awesome and that I know is going to come off my shelf because they're useful and good and exciting. So let me list it off. All right, I finished this thing. Here's the issue. Absolutely terrible name for the book. Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel. Every time I try to talk to you about it, I can barely remember it. Is it Journey Through the Radiant Citadel? Is it Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel? Also, Radiant Citadel is a super dope, awesome name. Why not just name it Radiant Citadel, right? So, garbage name right out of the gate. Okay, it's a problem, right? Because people don't even know how to talk about it. They don't even know if they have you go to a group you're involved with, and you're like, is this person's name Bill or Bob or like you're just, and you can't even get the name right. It's a terrible name. Absolute garbage cover. Just nothing is happening on the cover of the book, right? Like, there's no excitement. There's no, and here, okay, it's a bad cover. It's a bad cover, right? And the art is good, but nothing's happening in the picture. Like, it's literally somebody holding up an object and then some people behind them. Like, literally nothing is happening, right? And it's dark. There's not enough light. It's terrible cover, okay? Next, conflict. The book lacks conflict at 15 different levels. If you look at the book, all the non-player characters in a book are just somebody like smiling at you or frowning at you with nothing behind them, no context, doing nothing, right? That's the vast majority of the NPCs in the book is what they're doing, right? Now, maybe that's in other books, but it just looks particularly bad. The other thing is, if you look at this book, look for the conflict in this book. There is one scene where a person is actually moving toward a tiger with a spear. There are no sword clashes. There's no fights. There's no there's no conflict in this book, right? And it just makes it unexciting, all right? All the things I just said are secondary. Here is the worst part. This is why, in my humble opinion, Radiant Citadel did not hit, okay? There's nothing in it for players. Nothing. There are no new races, okay? The cities, actually, let me stand. So, 0 new races, 0 new magic items. What I mean by the magic item is, here's a stat block. Here's the magic item. Here's a list of magic items. This is a magic item. You need this to attune to it. And once you get it, it will do this, this, and this for you, right? And, like, in our game, the way we give treasure, we're like, hey, you got a very rare magic item. You can go look through your entire library and pick what you want, right? I'm never going to be... this book sits on the shelf. If my Dungeon Master gives me a very rare magic item, that book doesn't come off the shelf because there's nothing in it for me as a player. Nothing, right? Get this. No new races for players, right? Look at Wild Beyond the Witchlight. It has the Harengon, right? It has the Pixies. You pull it off the shelf because there's stuff you can use, right? Not a single new race. Not a single new magic item. Nothing. There's no statted magic items in this book. And here's the other thing is, if you downed an enemy, you would get their gear. There's nothing in, like, every piece of gear is just like, this is from the PHB or the DMG or whatever. There's nothing new, right? No new magic items. No new races. No new spells. Not a single new spell. We have tons of caster classes. We have Divine, Druid, Wizard, Cleric, like Warlock, Sorcerer. Nothing, not a single new spell in the entire book. And hey, if you see them and I don't, I look through the whole book. There's nothing there. Nothing. Right? Like, and I'm like, okay, no new magic items, no new spells, no new races, right? No new feats, no new feats, Strixhaven. New feat that breaks the entire, like, it's just so powerful, it makes all the old ones look ridiculous. No new feats. There's nothing here. What is this for? Who is this for? Why does you buy it? Everybody who's serious about D&D, you buy the new book when it drops, right? And then you go through and you say, how does this change everything that I have? How does this change my 48-year library, right? And the reality is, and every book in Perkinian Dungeons & Dragons changes something. What does this change, right? Every single civilization and homeland, where are they? Not linked to, like, on the ethereal plane, not linked to a single existing setting, right? I don't know the world they're on. I don't know the wild space system they're in. I don't get this, right? So I think, honestly, I'm going to lay this at the feet of Ajit George. What were you thinking? Why Ajit George? Why did you release a book that had no new races, no new spells, no new magic items, statted that people can use and pick up with the myriad of other adventures? There's nothing here. There's nothing here, right? No new feats, right? Like, it's just, there's nothing here, right? So the reality is, we have made history, and it is good, and it is progress, right? And I'm proud to have this book in my library, but it's not going to get pulled off the shelf, right? Like, it's just going to, I read it, goes right in the library. You have not given me a single reason to pull it off the shelf. Where am I wrong? What am I missing? What am I not seeing? When I look at the book and I compare it to every other book, right? Wild Beyond the Witchlight, new race, and Rime of the Frostbane, new magic items, and Strixhaven, new spells, and Strixhaven has every single thing. It has new race, new magic item, new spells, How could you build a book that has nothing new for players? That's my humble opinion, right? And I'm disappointed because I wanted this to show people, when you bring a diverse crowd together, this thing will never stay on the shelf. You'll be pulling it off pulling it off constantly because you need it, you want it. It adds to every single campaign. What's the part I'm missing, Ajit George? Please tell me. I'd love to know. I hope I'm wrong. Ajit George, please let me know. Why did you release a book that gives no reason for this to be pulled off the shelf after it's put onto the shelf after it's read? Ajit George, why did you abandon players with this? That's my humble opinion. That's my question to you, Ajit George. Has anybody else read this and is seeing something I'm missing? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.